So first of all, how did this session come about? Well, Glenn wrote an email to Lesley and me and saying, I would like you to collaborate at this year's conference and do something, to which Lesley responded,
yeah, I'm not prepared to collaborate, but I'm okay to cooperate.
Okay, and more precisely she said, I'm not prepared to collaborate with John. I went, ooh, that's interesting. And then she explained a bit more.
Yeah, I didn't think the scale of the problem required collaboration. It was, we're not going to be doing it as a long-term relationship. It was, I didn't think anyway. Who knows, there's another 30 years of NEC to go. But yeah, it wasn't big enough.
Okay. Okay, so we had a discussion and this is what emerged. So collaboration is the buzzword. Now let me stress, first of all, it's about collaboration. It's not against collaboration, okay? It's about collaboration and the overuse of the word. And it's first started to annoy me at the NEC Users Group Conference in 2017, which is the one when NEC 4 was launched, okay? And there, every third sentence was collaborative working, collaboration, 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 collaborative working, with no depth to it. And to be honest, it's continued to annoy me ever since, okay? Why is that? Well, first of all, people go, I've actually heard people say, we're doing this project to be collaborative, as if it's an objective of the project. A business reason for doing the project is to be collaborative. And no, you do projects to achieve outcomes and then set objectives based on those outcomes and then try and achieve them. Yeah. And I've also seen it during the project where people go, oh, we can't say that to the other party because we're collaborative. We're being collaborative. So let's brush this bad news under the carpet rather than actually use collaboration because we've got a good relationship, because we have mutual respect for the other party, etc., and their positions to raise an issue and then try and resolve it. Yeah? But we can't do that because it's collaboration, be collaborative. And what happens is if hard issues get brushed under the carpet, they get bigger, the emotion gets attached, and then they break out, and that's anti-collaborative because you're now in dispute. Little consideration of what it means in practice. So going back to the conference, no one said what or how they were going to be collaborative at that conference in 2017. Just before lockdown, me and Neil did an afternoon session at this conference, and we got people to think about, well, what are the features of their NEC contract which make it collaborative? And people had to think really hard. And then we said, and how do you operate it to make it collaborative? And they had to think even harder. Okay? So it's just that buzzword level. Now, related to that is there's this belief that if we collaborate, a high-level fluffy concept with no depth, then we'll have a successful contract. As Matthew said, Martin Barnes, co-instigator of the NEC, he helped found the Association for Project Management. He was an ex-president of the Association for Project Management, an ex-chair of the Association for Project Management. He was into project management, right? And he made the statement that if you see a successful project, cooperation or collaboration will be evident to some extent. But he saw it as a subset of project management. So you put in place all the good project management stuff and you have no cooperation or collaboration, and it's not going to work really as well. But if you just have collaboration and no structure, yeah, it's not going to work. So the analogy I use is it's like an engine on oil. If you've got no engine, you've got no grunt. You're going nowhere. It's helpful to have oil with it, yeah? But you've got to have the engine there in the first place. And lastly, there's no contractual requirement to collaborate except in those two clauses which I've highlighted there, but there is in the contract to cooperate. So I'm wondering where the Slido thing has appeared on this. No, it hasn't, because that was in my first brief. The point was, get ready for Slido if you haven't, so that we don't faff around when we go on to that. Over to you, Lesley. Oh, and yeah, we're going to get you to work in groups as well. Be prepared for that. Because Glenn said that we've got to have questions and answers, but he didn't say who asked the question and who provides the answer. So we thought we would do that. You should have used the present active. Who does what to who? NEC start. Over to Lesley.
Yeah, so just to confirm, if you can get yourselves into groups of 4 just now, look around you, make some new friends. Right, so we're looking at how did we get to collaboration. So 1993, NEC first published. We had 1994, we had the Latham report, and this was a review of the procurement arrangements in a quite adversarial construction industry, which is coping with lots of power imbalances. Now, the big things that came from Latham was improving relationships at a contract level, as well as an endorsement of NEC. We're moving on to the Egan report, Rethinking Construction. And here we're coming in is these are the benefits of working together. A 10% reduction in costs. We then have the industry response. And what you see as you go through here, that the items in green are showing you the UK government direction. So that's the Latham report, the Egan report, the construction strategy, the construction playbook, and outcome-focused scopes. And what we see next is how NEC is responding, and also how the industry is responding. So we've got things like the British standards coming through, the collaborative standards. There's now an ISO standard that tells you on a business level how to collaborate well. We've got Project 13, from transactions to enterprises. And what we see is that we've come on this journey from project level problems to programme level problems to systems level problems. So we're beginning to think, what level is our problem? And this brings us on to the collaboration continuum. So adversarial, well, this is pre-Latham, or maybe not. We're not focusing on delivery. We're focused on the fight. And what we can see here is that there is significant effort being expended in this. As we move towards the right on this continuum, we've got greater alignment and greater strength between the parties. But those bonds need maintenance and they are expensive. We've hit cooperation. Now this is what every NEC contract asks you to do. We're no longer adversarial. We're on a lot of informal personal relationship. There's weak informal links between the partners. Are we learning? We might have some lessons identified. We may do this at an informal level. We're moving stronger. We're more aligned. Our bonds are stronger. We've got a shared why. We've got aligned objectives. Lots of structural bonds between the parties. Common processes, governance, behaviour and culture. And then on the learning side, some of the lessons learned are being adopted. What did you do last project? Are you implementing it on this project? And then we're moving into our integrated enterprise, where we've got shared objectives and a network of strong bonds between the partners. A systems approach, post-delivery support, lots of different ways as to how the parties are connected. IT, BIM, and we have a continuous improvement culture. What does this look like? You might be seeing things like the programme going for lean accreditation, the ISO, I think it's 18404. Those are the sorts of things that you will be seeing in an integrated enterprise. And this is where Project 13 is really pushing us. So, get your phones ready. If you're not great with QR codes, your QR code is on the back of your programme. If you're not great with it, slido.com and put the number in.
first slide out, presentations. All department. And you have to click on the poll. It opens up under Q&A. So if you click on the poll tab, you should get an option A, B, C, D, and E.
Yeah, where is it?
And when I say where are you, I don't mean I'm super collaborative, but he's an idiot. I mean, where is your project? I mean, where is your project, not where are you personally? So 9% of us are fighting.
28% have gone for B, 39% have gone for C, 19% have gone for D, and 6% have gone for E.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good to see how we're getting on. So we're not, the weight of the room is very much towards the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side of the collaboration continuum.
Right, okay, so thanks. So, what does mutual trust and cooperation, so we talked about cooperation, but actually the contract starts with mutual trust and cooperation in 10.1. So NEC 3, it said mutual trust and cooperation, not all cooperation, mutual trust and cooperation, and you act as stated in this contract. NEC 4, it divides them into 2 sentences, but doesn't, I'm told, legally make any difference. You still have an obligation to act as stated in this contract and in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. So you should be doing both. But what does mutual trust and cooperation mean? Well, 10 years ago, you were probably, the lawyers loved arguing over it because there was no case law on it, so the lawyers could argue all they liked. And I know one lawyer who likes arguing. Not looking at anybody. And then case law started to appear, and now I think there's probably 7, 8, 9 bits of case law on it, which gives it some meaning. I could go off into a legal discussion around it, but I'm going to summarise it as going back to the first bit of case law on it, and the bullet point I picked out in terms of what it means in practice is you act with due regard to the other party's business. That does not mean you put the other party's business interests ahead of yours. It does not even mean you put the other party's interests on par with yours, from what I gather. It means that if you can do something relatively small, which has a disproportionate, and that's probably overstating it, effect on the other party's business, you should be doing it, yeah? So if you can help the other party out for relatively little effort, you should be doing it, yeah? Now, it does not have precedence over the other clauses. So in legal interpretation, detail overrides generality. The high-level mutual trust and cooperation does not override the detailed clauses. So 5 years ago I had the pleasure of being in the Ghana High Court for 4 days as an expert witness, and it was to do with a termination, and the other party's lawyer was saying, the employer shouldn't have terminated because that's not in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. And the judge said, well, by and large, actually, they followed the procedures of termination and those take precedence, yeah? Okay. So what does it, but most of the time, I think it's reinforcing to the objective of good management, good project management. So, for instance, if you're running a contract and things that you can do, you could cooperate with others in the working areas, yeah, because others are contributing to the client's project, yeah, and therefore, if you're having due regard to the client, you will cooperate with them to deliver a successful project, yeah. You could, for instance, if you see a potential problem, you could tell the other party about it, yeah, you know, ahead of time, for instance, yeah. And when you have a discussion around what should we do with this problem, you could try and find or seek solutions that bring advantage to all those affected, for instance. Yeah? That would be having due regard to the other party's business, rather than just going, oh, my way, this is my interest only. Yeah? You could, for instance, when and I've put in a subcontractor, because it's in the subcontract as well, mutual trust and cooperation. When there are compensation event occurs and there's potentially different ways of dealing with it, rather than just saying, give me loads of quotations and lots of extra work to work them up and then I'll pick and choose the best one, you could have a discussion with the contractor or subcontractor about different ways of dealing with that before they have to go off and do a lot of hard work. Okay, couldn't you? Or you could, for instance, if you're not accepting a communication like, I don't know, a contractor's 2,000 line programme and you think it's not realistic somewhere, rather than just saying it's not realistic, have another go, you could actually point at the bars and the method statements or statements of how the contractor's going to do the operation and say, that's where I have trouble with. This is the particular concern. If you correct that or provide further evidence, then, you know, I can accept it. That would be useful, wouldn't it? You know, rather than getting them to revise the whole of the programme when 95% plus is right. And who knows, if you're going to instruct a revised quotation for a compensation link because you don't like the original one, then, I don't know, you could perhaps give the contractor some feedback on why you don't like it, rather than just saying, have another go, yeah? It's not good enough. Now, do people recognise any of those things up there? I know Richard's onto it. I thought he was onto it for a moment. Hey, people recognise any of those? They're all in the contract already, yeah? So you could argue there is, in the contract, going down from this high-level mutual trust and cooperation, clauses which say, in this specific circumstance, you should be doing stuff like this, yeah? Okay? So, here's the mini Q&A for you, from us to you, okay? Have a quick think. So this is in groups of 4-ish, is what I'm thinking. So, what other clauses would it be good to act in the spirit of mutual trust and cooperation? Okay? So where else in the contract would it be good to have those? Because just because the clauses I identified are the express clauses, but where else would it be good to have due regard to the other party's duties? But the thing I'd like you to do is just take one and start to drill down to the level of behaviours. So people who were at last year's conference, or was it the year before Bob Cummings? Last year's, yeah? He talked about behaviours, what you can see and hear, yeah? Not sort of high-level words like communicate. We communicate more. Well, okay. What would I actually see and hear? What I'd like you to do is take one circumstance, and it could be ones from the previous slide, and ask the answer to say, under that specific clause, in a specific circumstance, what would I be doing? Or what am I doing, given the answers to the quiz, to the slide out, yeah? To be mutual trust and cooperating, with an ing being the active sense, yeah? Rather than just an abstract concept. That's what I want you to take you down from an abstract to a specifics, okay? So, I'll let you get on with that for 4 minutes, yeah? Okay, starting now, and then we'll get, it'd be nice if some people cooperated with us at the end, like you're feeling that. Thank you. Okay, so as I've put up there, it would be nice if some of you cooperated with us by giving some feedback on what you discussed. I know you only had 4 minutes or something like that, but who would like to cooperate by offering up a specific circumstance and what they would be doing in mutual trusting and cooperation? And Richard, have we got any volunteers? Oh, yes. Nathan, over there, that man over there.
I don't need the mic. I think we came up with lots of areas within the contract where we could act more collaboratively. I think the best one was probably on the programme, where contractors submit a programme and then the client rejects the programme, and there's very little discussion about why the rejections occur. So if we're acting more collaboratively, you'd have a programme assessment meeting, and the programme would become more of the project programme rather than the contractor's programme.
Okay, so do you need to, going back to Lesley's collaboration spectrum, do you need to be collaborating or cooperating?
I think collaboration would help better if it was owned by the project rather than being the contractor's programme client assessing, which quite often I've seen projects, that's what happens.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you. Have we got another volunteer? So, Ross, I think if you make it.
The suggestion was I'll do a bit of mic.
Yeah, if we can use the microphone because the session is being recorded, that would just mean that everything gets picked up by the video as well.
Yeah, I thought you'd asked that. The suggestion here was that cooperation would be to respond to things promptly rather than wait to the end of the time period stated in the contract.
Yeah, yeah. See them genuinely as maximums. Okay, and someone on this side. Joe. Oh.
Testing. We were discussing the dividing date and having more cooperation surrounding pricing, compensation event promptly with a reasonable forecast from the dividing date rather than hanging on to a quotation and saying, you only used 6 machines rather than 7 that you price. Let's go back to actuals. Whereas there probably needs to be more cooperation around that reasonable forecast upfront and prompt.
Okay, thank you very much. And one last one. Yep, Chris.
Thank you. We talked about early warnings, because I see all ends of the spectrum in that kind of process. And in particular, how parties respond to early warnings. We're very closed, you're very interested, thank you very much. Put it on register. To tell me more, I'm really interested, really find out more. Dare I say it, what I'd like to see in this example of what you want to see here is people talking to each other outside contractual correspondence. Pick the phone up. Don't seem to do that much these days, for some reason. But I think having that fluid, ongoing conversation, debate about the risk is what we're seeing in that example.
Okay, thank you very much. And regrettably, we have to move on. So this here, behaviour is what we're talking about, the talking to each other, the picking up the phone. I can see people do that, yeah? That, what people say and do, is the end point of mutual trust and cooperation. By that I mean is that's the result of it, yeah? Doing stuff. And it can be enhanced by behavioural training and coaching, as in getting a psychologist in and so on. There's no doubt about that. Okay, but there's a lot more to it than that, I would say. Think about this. If you want, wherever you are on the spectrum, whether it's cooperation or collaboration or full integration, does choosing the right contract strategy help? Yeah, so if you've got a contractor, if you can define what you want, and there's contractors who are much more experienced and able to deliver it than you are, it might be the best thing just to use an option A contract and get out of their way to let them to do it. But at times, things change, that's when you cooperate, yeah? On the other hand, bigger projects, etc., a full-on alliance might be more appropriate, yeah? What secondary options are selected, and as well, what level of remedies and what caps on liabilities and things like that are. Because, I want you to cooperate with me, but if you don't perform, God, I'm going to get one over you, yeah? I'm going to put your business out of business. Well, what does that engender? Oh, Jesus, I can't be at fault, so whenever there's a problem, it's not me, it's you, yeah? Okay. Selection criteria and process. If you're going for lowest cost and you're selecting a contractor or a subcontractor and you know it's the lowest price and you're pretty much sure that it's below what it's actually going to cost them, well, how's that going to set the project up or the contract up for success? Yeah. How you start the contract. Do you sit down? Do you establish behavioural rules? Do you establish, for instance, these other things like how are you going to set up the offices so that it's easy for people to speak? The last contract I was on, it was a bypass and it joined up at the northern end, and there were 2 car parks, one on either side of the main road, and we had the contractors in one car park, the client in the other, and to go to the other offices we had to walk down the existing road to a pedestrian crossing 100 metres down the road. So it's 200 metres on, just to go and see someone else. Do you think that there was lots of discussion as a result? No. Do you just have joint offices, but you go into the entrance lobby and you turn left and it's the contractors, and you turn right, it's the client side? or do you share different sides of corridors, or do you go fully integrated, yeah? It depends upon how you're setting up the contract in terms of organisation. At the very least, you want to say, well, let's set it up so that this person talks to that person talks to that. And that might be a hands-off relationship, and that might be appropriate. Or is it you're more integrated? Yeah? But what you don't want to be doing is two parties in isolation going, oh, my organisation is this, yours is that, oh, they don't fit. Yeah? What's the meetings? What meetings do you have? What's the drumbeat? Do you consciously set up those meetings? Do you have standard agendas? What IT systems are you using? Is it one project IT system, or is it access, limited access, read-only access, etc.? All those things feed into cooperation and collaboration, right? And all those things affect behaviours. So if you haven't done any of this thinking and then you just expect a behavioural psychologist to come along and wave their magic wand and suddenly people start being cooperative or collaborative, I think it goes back further, okay? And on that, this would be the great link over to Lesley, except I just wanted to say something else. And that was to go back to Lesley's slide here and say, if you don't think about these things, you are probably entering into the contract somewhere around there, yeah? You're not deliberately planning to be adversarial. You're not planning to be mutually trusting and cooperative. But where do you think the project will trend? Yeah, Richard's gone that way. Yeah, I could go that way if I'm mirroring him, yeah? Yeah, it will trend towards adversarial. It'll be fluke if it becomes cooperative. Yeah? So do this good project management stuff. It's all in the literature. Do this good project management stuff. All right? What's the expression? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Okay, over to Liz.
He's coming back, don't worry. Okie dokie. So there's lots of ways of defining collaboration. I think there's some folk in Ukraine who are in court for collaborating with the Russians. There's lots and lots of definitions of collaboration. The one I'm going with here is from the Institute of Collaborative Working, who are the people behind ISO 44001, which is the ISO standard for business-to-business collaboration. So we're looking at business relationships formed by committed organisations to maximise joint performance for the achievement of mutual objectives and the creation of additional value. So what do we actually mean by that, and how does that translate to the contract? John's spoken about how the relationships, whether you like it or not, whether you're walking over your footbridge to talk to each other, are defined by the contract. And the contract sets the environment for delivery behaviours. So what we're thinking about here, we're thinking about, when we go back to our collaboration continuum, we're thinking about what bonds do we have and how are we aligned. So who are we forming relationships with? What about our supply chain? When are we talking to people? But really, what is everybody bringing to the party? Because we want to be creating additional value. And if we know everything, do we need to? If they're better placed, let them get on with it. Aligned or mutual objectives. When we start looking at Egan, he talks about mutual objectives. John talks a lot more about aligned objectives. And I'm in the middle and I'm both. Aligned is at a business-to-business level. Mutual is, I think there's a really nice story about President Kennedy in 1962 going to NASA facilities, and he goes and has a chat to the guy who's sweeping the floor and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." So when you see that, everybody's objective at an individual level is mutual. Is that happening in your project? In terms of, and if it is, actually how are they communicated? So how can you get your objectives in more places? So you can do the communication stuff, which is outside of the contract, but you can also be looking at your contract data, your description of the works. I'm doing this to deliver that. You can put stuff in your scope. The Alliance contract has a section on objectives, as does X12. So the creation of additional value, I think this is really, really key. We need to create something that we don't already know. So if you know exactly what you want as a client, you may not, and exactly how it should be delivered, there's probably not a lot of scope to collaborate. There's not a lot of value that can be created. So it's the opportunity to do something new. It costs, all of those extra bonds cost money. Is it worth it? Are you going to be creating value, or are you going to be absorbing it in your collaboration administration? Cooperation could be a really good place for you if there's not a lot of value to be created. So, when we go back to our contract strategy, how do we create alignments? And we talk about risk and reward, and they should be properly balanced. I prefer to separate this thinking and say, let's remove the barriers where our objectives are in conflict. Are reasonable costs incurred covered? The word there is reasonable. This isn't a blank check. Is the target in a mutually comfortable place? If the target's really low, you're going to spend the whole time fighting and trying to drive it. Is risk appropriately allocated? And this is about aligning the parties at a business level. And that tallies with the incentivisation. Is there significant opportunity for a business to do something different? Do people actually know? So I see lots of really complicated commercial models. Do people actually understand that if they do this, then they get that? Or is it too complicated to communicate? So that's what we're looking at in incentivisation. We can be looking at relationship managements there as well. The one I really like is the line of sight to outcomes. Is it clear what you're actually trying to do? So you've got your why. Why are we doing this? What outcomes do I want? And then you can have some metrics as exactly how you'd measure those. And then in terms of your scope, are you doing what's necessary to deliver them? So that creating that clear line of sight. And if it's not necessary for your why, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And then the final one is actually around governance. So we've got everybody in the project, mostly in alignment, but what is actually happening elsewhere? Is there governance within parent organisations that's coming in? Is there lack of alignment there? All of these things are the things you think about within the contract strategy to create the alignment. So then we've got the bonds, and I think in our last exercise we talked a little bit about the bonds. Now, some of the bonds are obviously contract related. We've got stuff on contract type. Are we going for a framework, an alliance contract, design, build, operate? Our contract processes, when we touch each other, that sounds odd, sounds very odd. When we're connected, every early warning, every requirement for communication is another bond that's being formed. Are you picking up the phone before an early warning lands, for example? We've got various things that you can do in your scope, an implementation plan. You can put in there exactly how you want to work together. So those meetings, cadence and agendas, could be in the contract, or it could be, and you put that in your scope, or it could just be something you do less formally. So what we've got in the green on the bottoms, co-location, IT, data, meeting cadence, governance, relationship management, that can be in the contract, or it doesn't have to be. We've got information modelling, X12, X20, X29, X21, whole life cost, so we're thinking about the end user, much more systems perspective. X22, we're getting people involved earlier. These are all the ways that our bonds are being strengthened. And then we've got our project relationships. The one thing I wanted to put a little bit of a highlight on is early warnings. Now, last year I came here and said, we know that the people make the projects, but if we've got a people problem, do we notify an early warning on it? And the answer that came back was 50% of the time, no we don't. So we can be looking at where do we want to be working with that. What can you be doing? You could be putting stuff on your early warning register as a nudge. Is our relationship okay? You can also be putting stuff on, you can be having a style guide for early warnings, that they're always drafted as project problems. So here's the question coming back. Having gone through what things look like, the question is, are you content, not your position, your project's position on the collaboration continuum? You're going to be back in your groups of 4. What actions could you take to move your project or programme left or right? More cooperative or to a more integrated approach? And you've got 4 minutes. 3 minutes, forgive me. I'm seeing an awful lot of collaboration going on. Okie dokie, do we have any volunteers for some feedback?
I chipped in something that I've been saying for donkey's years. I think groups like this, we should try and get ourselves set up with a really simple way to, quote, measure how well we think we're getting on. Just a very simple tool that we can all join up to use. And just to measure, everybody says if you don't measure it, you don't do anything about it. And yet we see these relationships going downhill. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, I've seen that work quite well before. And rather than using it as a thing to track, I've seen it used quite well as a, how do we think it's going at the start of a meeting. So rather than it being a metric that we're looking to beat, it's a discussion point at the start of a meeting. I've seen that work really well. Anybody else? Everybody happy with their place on their continuum? Or is Glenn got his clock?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think, so 21st of October 1994, which brings to mind, so most of you too young to remember, we had a collapse on Heathrow Express after having a traditional way of working. After that we went into an integrated team. I think that idea, like John, I hate the word collaboration. What does that mean? I use a very simple country boy expression, which is get the good working. How are you going to do all of these things? Because you're going to have all that detail in the contract, people don't read it. That idea of breaking down the barriers between people by having a coffee, talking to each other, and I think the key thing you're also missing, by doing that, you are going to be so much more efficient. I can't tell you how much more efficient it was, rather than playing table tennis, to actually sit down and talk with people and have shared facilities. Maybe not all the time, but those regular meetings are absolutely key, I think. But the efficiency, it really does, because I think you, Lesley, said it costs money. I tell you what, you can save an awful lot of money by actually working together. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But you've got to work at it, because we don't really train people to do that, do we? Nobody, what does that look like? And you must people, when we talk about the programme, often when I do training is, we've got this programme, it's a great tool, right, what's your working, how are you going to do, what are you going to do every day, every week to make this work? And that I think is the key to me. Indeed. So over to our conclusions.
Okay, our conclusions are, so if you are under NEC, you are obligated to do mutual trust and cooperation. That is a contractual minimum, and it means something now. 10 years ago, you could argue it didn't. Now it does. Judges quote that expression in their judgments, etc., and so on. Okay, so that's a minimum obligation. As well as contract strategy, think about what it means in practice. Think about it, talk about it, act on it. Okay. Because if you don't, you're going to just veer back towards being adversarial. And collaboration takes effort and it takes investment. So are you really up for it? Where along the spectrum is the optimum place for you to be? How much investment should you put into it? What does it look like in practice? Okay, and why would you stop collaborating? Yeah, because if you look at the, is it ISO 44,000 on collaborative working, they have an exit plan, yeah? Mature relationships have an exit plan. Okay, so with that, thank you very much.